What if I told you that anger is not your real problem? That the explosions, the silence, the regret afterward, the words you wish you could take back, they are only symptoms. Most people today walk around carrying anger like a loaded weapon, not because they are bad people, but because they were never taught how to control their inner world. We snap at the people we love. We rage at traffic, at delays, at disrespect. We replay old wounds in our minds and call it justified. And then we wonder why we feel exhausted, ashamed, or out of control. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Anger doesn't make you strong. It makes you predictable. And anything predictable can be controlled. The ancient Stoics understood this long before modern psychology, social media outrage, or self-help trends. They lived in a world of war, betrayal, exile, disease, and loss, yet they trained themselves to remain calm when others burned. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor burdened with absolute power and constant pressure, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That wasn't philosophy for comfort. That was survival training for the soul. Stoicism does not teach you to suppress anger. It teaches you to dismantle it at the root, to see it clearly, to understand it, and to stop letting it run your life. In this video, we're breaking down 10 Stoic principles that will teach you how to control anger. Not temporarily, not emotionally, but fundamentally. This is not motivational noise. This is not toxic positivity. This is discipline. This is clarity. This is mental authority. Before we begin, do one thing with intention. Don't treat this like background audio. Anger costs people relationships, opportunities, respect, and years of their lives. If you're serious about mastering yourself, like this video now, drop a comment when a principle hits close to home. Share this with someone who struggles with anger in silence. And do not skip any part, because one missed principle could be the difference between control and regret in a moment that truly matters. Let's begin. Principle number 1. Separate what is within your control from what is not. Each morning before the world speaks to us, we must speak to ourselves. Anger does not arrive by force. It is invited by confusion. It enters when we mistake external events for personal attacks, when we believe that what happens to us is the same as what happens within us. The first discipline of mastering anger begins here, drawing a clean, unshakable line between what belongs to us and what never will. Without this distinction, we are at the mercy of every word, every delay, every slight, real or imagined. We learn slowly and deliberately that the world does not obey our wishes. Other people will disappoint us. Circumstances will resist us. Plans will collapse without apology. Yet none of these things carry the power to command our inner state unless we surrender that power willingly. As Epictetus reminded us, some things are up to us and some things are not. This is not a comforting thought. It is a clarifying one. Anger thrives in the illusion that reality should bend to our expectations. What then is truly ours? Our judgments, our intentions, our choices, our response. Anger erupts when we forget this ownership and try to govern what was never placed in our care. We attempt to control other people's respect, other people's behavior, other people's understanding, and when we fail, we burn. The disciplined mind does something radical instead. It releases the impossible task and gathers its strength around what it can command absolutely, the inner verdict we pass on events. Consider how often anger begins with a single, unexamined thought. This should not be happening. That thought alone carries more destructive force than the event itself. The event is neutral. The judgment is incendiary. Once we learn to pause and question that judgment, anger loses its urgency. We ask, is this truly within my control? If the answer is no, then anger becomes not only useless, but irrational, a protest against the laws of reality. This is why the practiced mind greets frustration with inquiry, not outrage. When insulted, we do not immediately react. We examine. When delayed, we do not explode. We assess. We remind ourselves that another person's words are not weapons unless we treat them as such. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private reflections, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That realization is the first quiet victory over anger. Each morning becomes a rehearsal for this truth. We anticipate difficulty not to grow fearful, but to grow prepared. We remind ourselves that people may act selfishly, ignorantly, or harshly, and that none of this is new. When it happens, we are not surprised and therefore not enraged. Anger feeds on shock. Preparation starves it. By expecting resistance from the world, we remove its ability to destabilize us. This practice reshapes our identity. We stop seeing ourselves as victims of circumstance and begin to see ourselves as stewards of our inner world. The moment anger rises, it becomes a signal, not a command. It tells us we are attempting to control the uncontrollable. And so we return again and again to the one domain where mastery is always possible: our own reasoned response. There is humility in this discipline. We admit that the universe owes us nothing, not fairness, not ease, not validation, and in that admission we gain freedom. Anger demands that the world be different. Wisdom accepts the world as it is and focuses on becoming better within it. Seneca warned that anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. The injury passes, the inner damage lingers. Over time, this separation becomes instinctive. We no longer chase control where it cannot be found. We invest our energy where it yields returns: clarity, composure, dignity. Anger begins to feel unnecessary, not because we are numb, but because we are aligned with reality. We respond firmly when needed, calmly when possible, and always deliberately. This is not weakness, it is precision. Thus, the path to mastering anger does not begin with suppression or denial. It begins with ownership. Each day we claim what is ours, our thoughts, our judgments, our actions, and we release the rest without resentment. In doing so, we take the first decisive step toward inner sovereignty. The world may remain chaotic, but within us, order is restored. And from that order, true strength is born. Principle number 2, create space between provocation and response. Anger feels immediate, but it is not inevitable. It thrives in speed, in the split second where sensation turns into reaction without permission from reason. The second discipline of mastering anger is learning to slow time itself, not externally but internally, to place a deliberate pause between what happens and how we answer it. This pause is not hesitation born of fear. It is restraint born of strength. Without it, anger rules us like a reflex. With it, anger becomes something we observe, not something that commands us. Most people believe anger erupts because events are overwhelming. In truth, it erupts because the mind rushes to judgment. The faster the judgment, the hotter the anger. When insulted, contradicted, ignored, or disrespected, the untrained mind leaps instantly to meaning. I am being attacked. I am being diminished. I must strike back. The disciplined mind interrupts this chain. It inserts a moment of silence where chaos expected obedience. This silence is where freedom lives. Viktor Frankl, a modern voice aligned with ancient wisdom, once observed, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." That space is not given, it is cultivated, and anger dissolves rapidly when it is forced to wait. What cannot rush, cannot dominate. We begin each morning by training for this moment. We remind ourselves that today will test us. Someone will speak carelessly, something will go wrong, the body will feel the familiar heat rising, and when it does, we do nothing at first. We breathe. We stand still inwardly. We allow the surge to crest and fall without acting on it. This alone weakens anger's authority because anger depends on urgency to survive. In that pause, we ask better questions. Is this truly an insult or merely sound? Is this delay an injustice or an inconvenience? Is this worth surrendering my composure? These questions do not excuse wrongdoing, they clarify it. Once clarified, anger often finds it has no solid ground to stand on. What remains is judgment without rage, action without venom. Seneca warned that anger is temporary madness. Madness by nature is impulsive. The pause is its cure. By refusing immediate expression, we restore sanity. We remember who we are. We remember that dignity is fragile, and once broken, difficult to rebuild. A single uncontrolled response can undo years of discipline. The pause protects what we have worked to become. Over time, this practice reshapes our nervous system. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once triggered us loses its sharpness. We no longer feel compelled to defend our ego at every moment. Silence becomes a tool. Delay becomes a weapon, not against others, but against our own excesses. We respond less often, but with greater force when it truly matters. This does not mean we become passive. On the contrary, our actions gain precision. When we finally speak or act, it is guided by reason, not heat. We correct without cruelty. We confront without losing ourselves. Anger wants spectacle. Mastery prefers effectiveness, and effectiveness requires calm. The world will try to rush us. It will provoke urgency, outrage, and instant reaction. We resist this pressure by remembering that nothing important is decided well in fury. Every time we pause, we reclaim authorship of our character. We remind ourselves that no one can force us into becoming lesser than we intend to be. Thus, the second step toward mastering anger is simple but demanding. Do not answer immediately. Create space. Breathe. Let reason arrive before words do. In that space, anger weakens, clarity strengthens, and we step closer to inner command. What once controlled us becomes something we control, not through force but through deliberate restraint. Principle number 3. Examine the judgment that fuels the flame. Anger is not born from events themselves, but from the story we tell about them. Before it hardens into action, anger passes through a single gateway: judgment. We decide, often without awareness, that something is offensive, unfair, or intolerable. That decision, not the event, ignites the fire. The third discipline is therefore ruthless honesty with ourselves. We learn to turn inward and ask not, "What happened?" but "What did I decide this meant?" Most anger is sustained by assumptions. We assume intent where there may be none. We assume disrespect where there may be ignorance. We assume malice where there may be weakness. These assumptions feel convincing in the heat of the moment, yet they are rarely tested. The practiced mind slows down just enough to put the judgment on trial. What evidence do I have? Is there another explanation? Am I reacting to facts or to interpretation? This is not an exercise in excusing behavior. It is an exercise in accuracy. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that people act from what seems right to them, even when they are wrong. When we grasp this, anger loses its moral certainty. We begin to see that outrage often says more about our expectations than about the offense itself. And expectations, unlike reality, are negotiable. Each morning we prepare for this work. We remind ourselves that perception is not truth. It is a lens. A dirty lens distorts even clear light. When anger appears, we clean the lens before acting. We strip the situation down to its raw elements. Words spoken, actions taken, facts observed. Everything else, the tone we imagined, the insult we inferred, the motive we assigned, is temporarily set aside. In doing so, we often discover how much of our anger is self-generated. A careless remark becomes an insult only when pride demands it. A delay becomes an injustice only when entitlement insists upon it. A disagreement becomes disrespect only when ego feels threatened. By identifying these inner drivers, we weaken anger at its source. We stop feeding it narratives it cannot survive without. Epictetus taught that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. This insight is unsettling because it removes our favorite excuse, blame. Yet it is also empowering. If judgment creates disturbance, judgment can dissolve it. The moment we see this clearly, anger shifts from something that happens to us into something we can work with. This practice demands courage. It is easier to condemn than to examine, easier to react than to reflect. Yet every time we question our judgment, we strengthen our inner authority. We move from reflex to reason. We become less predictable to provocation, less available to manipulation. Anger thrives on unquestioned certainty. Inquiry starves it. Over time, this habit reshapes how we meet the world. We become slower to label, quicker to understand. Not because we are naive, but because we are precise. Precision leaves little room for rage. When we see clearly, we act cleanly. When we act cleanly, we leave no residue of regret behind. The reward of this discipline is quiet power. Others may shout, we listen. Others may accuse, we analyze. Others may rage, we remain intact. This does not make us indifferent, it makes us sovereign. We are no longer dragged by interpretations we never chose consciously in the first place. Thus, the third step toward mastering anger is to interrogate the judgment beneath it. Before raising our voice, we raise a question. Before condemning, we clarify. In doing so, we reclaim control over the stories that govern our emotions. And when the story changes, the fire loses its fuel. What remains is clarity, steady, grounded, and unshakable. Principle number 4, anticipate difficulty before it arrives. Anger often feels explosive because it catches us unprepared. It arrives as a shock, an interruption to how we believed the day should unfold. The fourth discipline is therefore not reactive, but anticipatory. We train ourselves to meet adversity before it meets us, not with anxiety, but with clear-eyed acceptance. When the mind expects smooth roads, every obstacle feels like an injustice. When the mind expects resistance, obstacles lose their power to provoke. Each morning we quietly remind ourselves of a simple truth. Today will not go exactly as planned. People will misunderstand us, promises may be broken, effort may go unrecognized. This is not pessimism, it is alignment with reality. Anger feeds on violated expectations. Remove the expectation and anger starves. What we have already accepted cannot enrage us when it appears. Marcus Aurelius began his days by rehearsing this reality in his own mind. He reminded himself that he would encounter selfishness, arrogance, and ignorance, not to grow bitter, but to remain steady when they appeared. By doing so, he denied anger its favorite weapon, surprise. What is expected feels lighter. What is prepared for feels manageable. This discipline does not harden us against others. It softens us against frustration. We stop demanding that people be wiser, kinder, or more considerate than they are capable of being in that moment. We see human behavior as part of the terrain, not a personal offense. When someone disappoints us, we are not shaken, we are confirmed. And confirmation does not ignite anger, it reinforces clarity. Anger often says, "I did not consent to this difficulty." Premeditation responds, "You did." By choosing to face the day knowing it may test us, we reclaim consent. We are no longer ambushed by inconvenience or insult. We are participants in a world that behaves according to its nature, not our preferences. Seneca warned that the mind suffers more in imagination than in reality, yet the opposite is also true. The mind that imagines difficulty in advance suffers less when it arrives. By calmly visualizing potential frustrations, we reduce their emotional impact. When they appear, they feel familiar, not threatening. This practice transforms anger into readiness. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we ask, "How will I respond well to this?" The shift is subtle but decisive. Anger looks backward at violated hopes. Readiness looks forward to appropriate action. One drains energy, the other focuses it. Over time, we develop emotional resilience that others mistake for indifference. But it is not indifference, it is endurance. We still care, we still act. We simply refuse to be shocked by the predictable imperfections of life. Our calm becomes durable because it is built on truth, not wishful thinking. The world does not owe us ease. It offers challenge by default. When we accept this, anger begins to feel unnecessary, even childish, a protest against the structure of existence itself. We outgrow that protest. We choose steadiness over surprise, preparedness over panic. Thus, the fourth step toward mastering anger is to greet the day already acquainted with difficulty. Expect resistance, expect imperfection, expect human weakness, including your own. When these things arrive, they find no open door to fury, only a prepared mind standing firm, ready to respond with discipline rather than rage. Principle number 5. Remember the cost of unchecked anger. Anger promises strength, but it delivers damage. In the moment, it feels righteous, energizing, even necessary. Yet every outburst carries a cost that is paid long after the heat has faded. The fifth discipline is remembering this cost, clearly, honestly, without romanticism. We do not ask whether anger feels justified. We ask what it leaves behind. No emotion should be indulged without examining the wreckage it creates. Unchecked anger rarely strikes only its target. It spreads. It poisons tone, corrodes relationships, distorts judgment, and leaves words in the air that cannot be recalled. Long after the situation has passed, the consequences remain. Trust weakened, respect diminished, self-respect wounded. Anger is loud, but its aftermath is silent, and it is in that silence that regret speaks most clearly. Seneca wrote that anger is a short madness that harms the one who hosts it more than the one it confronts. This is not metaphor, it is observation. Anger narrows perception. It blinds us to alternatives. It convinces us that force is clarity and volume is power. Only later do we see how much ground we surrendered in those moments. Each morning we recall times when anger betrayed us, not to wallow in guilt, but to learn. We remember the argument that escalated unnecessarily, the relationship strained by a careless outburst, the opportunity lost because composure failed. These memories are not chains, they are warnings. They remind us that anger rarely solves what it claims to address. This recollection sharpens restraint. When provoked, we now see beyond the present moment. We see the ripple effects before they spread. We recognize that a single reaction can define how others remember us and how we remember ourselves. The question shifts from "do I have a right to be angry?" to "is this worth the price I will pay?" Marcus Aurelius urged himself to act in ways he would not be ashamed to revisit. This is the standard anger fails most often. It acts without regard for memory. But we live with our actions long after the emotion that fueled them has vanished. Mastery means choosing responses we can stand beside tomorrow. Anger also trains others how to treat us. Explosive reactions invite fear, defensiveness, or distance. Calm firmness invites respect. Over time, the difference compounds. A person known for anger becomes predictable, easy to provoke, easy to manipulate. A person known for restraint becomes formidable, not because they never act, but because when they do, it matters. This discipline deepens our sense of responsibility. We stop viewing anger as something that simply happens. We recognize it as a choice with consequences. And once a choice is seen clearly, it loses its power to masquerade as inevitability. We become more careful not because we are timid, but because we are wise. The cost of anger is not only external, it fractures inner harmony. Each outburst creates distance between who we are in calm reflection and who we become in fury. That distance is painful. Integrity demands alignment. We seek to be the same person under pressure as we are in solitude. Thus, the fifth step toward mastering anger is remembrance. We remember the damage anger leaves in its wake. We remember that strength is measured not by how fiercely we react, but by how cleanly we live afterward. With this awareness, anger loses its false appeal, and restraint becomes an act of self-respect. Principle number 6. Replace anger with purposeful action. Anger demands release. If denied an outlet, it festers. If given the wrong one, it destroys. The sixth discipline is not suppression, but redirection. We learn to convert the raw energy of anger into deliberate action guided by reason. Emotion is power. Left unmanaged, it burns the house down. Properly harnessed, it forges resolve. Mastery lies not in extinguishing the fire, but in learning how to use its heat without being consumed. Most anger arises from a perceived wrong, a boundary crossed, a value violated, an effort dismissed. When this happens, the untrained response is eruption. The trained response is movement. We ask, what action improves this situation without compromising who I am? This question transforms anger from a scream into a signal. It becomes information pointing toward correction, not chaos. We remind ourselves that rage is noisy but ineffective. Purposeful action is quiet and decisive. Marcus Aurelius urged himself to meet injustice with justice, not imitation. When we answer anger with thoughtful action, we deny it its usual expression while preserving its motivating force. We become architects of outcomes rather than prisoners of impulse. Each morning we prepare our mind for this conversion. We resolve that if anger arises, it will be put to work, not in arguments that spiral, but in boundaries clearly stated, not in insults returned, but in standards enforced, not in revenge, but in improvement. Action rooted in reason has a cleansing effect. It restores order where emotion threatened disorder. This discipline demands patience. Action does not always mean immediate confrontation. Sometimes it means stepping back, gathering facts, and choosing the right moment. Sometimes it means channeling energy into work, training, or creation. Areas where effort compounds rather than corrodes. Anger that fuels discipline becomes ambition. Anger that fuels reflection becomes wisdom. Epictetus taught that no one can harm us unless we cooperate with the harm. Purposeful action withdraws that cooperation. We refuse to add emotional damage to external difficulty. We respond in ways that strengthen our position, not weaken it. In doing so, we turn adversity into leverage. Over time, this practice changes how anger feels. It no longer surges as chaos. It arrives as pressure, directed, usable. We recognize it early and decide its fate. The moment we choose action over reaction, anger loses its ability to hijack us. It becomes subordinate to intention. Others notice this shift. They sense that provocation no longer guarantees an emotional payoff. Drama finds no audience here. What remains is clarity, firmness, and follow-through. This presence commands respect, not through intimidation, but through consistency. We become someone whose response is measured and therefore taken seriously. This discipline also preserves inner unity. We act in ways that align with our values rather than contradict them. No apologies are needed afterward. No repair work is required. We move forward cleanly. Anger converted into action leaves no residue of shame. Thus, the sixth step toward mastering anger is transformation. We take its energy and give it purpose. We refuse to waste it on noise or destruction. Directed by reason, it becomes fuel for growth, correction, and strength. What once threatened to rule us now works for us, obedient to the will we have trained to lead. Principle number 7, practice compassion without surrendering control. Anger often wears the mask of moral superiority. It tells us we are justified because someone else is wrong. The 7th principle cuts through this illusion by introducing compassion, not as softness but as understanding. We learn to see human behavior clearly without surrendering our standards. Compassion does not excuse harm, it explains it, and explanation weakens anger's grip by removing the fantasy that people act from pure malice. When anger rises, it usually assumes intent. They meant to disrespect me. They chose to be careless. They wanted to provoke me. Yet lived experience teaches otherwise. Most people act from ignorance, fear, habit, or inner disorder. Recognizing this does not absolve them of responsibility, but it frees us from unnecessary fury. We stop personalizing behavior that was never personal to begin with. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that people err because they do not know better, not because they wake each morning intent on harm. Holding this view does not weaken us, it stabilizes us. Anger depends on the belief that offense was deliberate. Compassion introduces doubt, and doubt cools the fire. Each morning we rehearse this perspective. We remind ourselves that today we will encounter flawed humans, just as others will encounter our own flaws. This mutual imperfection becomes a bond, not a battleground. When someone fails us, we respond with clarity instead of cruelty, firmness instead of fury. Control is preserved. Dignity remains intact. Compassion also directs anger inward when necessary. We recognize our own capacity for error and hypocrisy. This humility acts as a counterweight to outrage. It prevents us from demanding perfection from others while excusing ourselves. The more honest we are about our own shortcomings, the less tempting rage becomes. Seneca warned that anger punishes ourselves for the mistakes of others. Compassion interrupts this cycle. It allows us to address wrongdoing without poisoning our inner state. We correct, we set boundaries, we withdraw if necessary, but we do so without hatred. Hatred clouds judgment, compassion clarifies it. This discipline reshapes our interactions. We listen more carefully, we speak more precisely, we choose words that resolve rather than inflame. Anger seeks domination. Compassion seeks understanding without surrender. The two cannot coexist for long. One must give way. When compassion leads, anger finds no foothold. Over time, we become harder to provoke, not because we tolerate abuse, but because we refuse to interpret everything as an attack. This composure unsettles those who thrive on reaction. Calm becomes our quiet defense. We do not need to raise our voice to be heard. Compassion also protects us from bitterness, the long-term residue of unresolved anger. Bitterness corrodes slowly and invisibly. By meeting others with understanding rather than resentment, we keep our inner world clean. We remain capable of trust, connection, and reasoned action. Thus, the seventh step toward mastering anger is clear vision of human nature. We practice compassion without surrendering control. We hold others accountable without hatred, and in doing so, we preserve what anger so often destroys: clarity, dignity, and inner peace. Principle number 8. Reduce desire for validation and control of outcomes. Much of our anger is not about what happens, but about how we want to be seen. We want respect, agreement, recognition, obedience. When these desires are frustrated, anger rushes in to defend a wounded sense of self. The eighth discipline asks us to confront this honestly. The more we depend on external validation, the more fragile we become. Anger is often the protest of an ego that expected applause and received indifference instead. We begin to notice how frequently anger follows unmet expectations of approval. A suggestion ignored, effort overlooked, authority questioned. In each case, the injury is not to our character, but to our desire to be affirmed. Once we see this pattern, anger loses its disguise. It is no longer a righteous reaction. It is a signal of misplaced dependence. Epictetus warned that if we tie our peace to the opinions of others, we hand them ownership of our inner world. This is the quiet trap anger sets for us. It convinces us that emotional turmoil is proof of self-respect, when in reality it is evidence of external control. Freedom begins when we stop asking the world to confirm our worth. Each morning we remind ourselves why we act, not to be praised, but to act rightly, not to be agreed with, but to be aligned with reason. When our aim is virtue rather than validation, anger loses much of its leverage. Disagreement becomes tolerable. Criticism becomes manageable. Silence from others no longer feels like an insult. This discipline also loosens our grip on outcomes. Anger flares when results do not match effort, when things do not turn out as planned. Yet effort and outcome are not equal partners. We control the former. The latter is shaped by countless forces beyond us. The more we demand specific results, the more combustible our inner state becomes. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to focus on doing his work well and accepting whatever followed with calm. When we do the same, we stop arguing with reality. Anger often says, "This should have worked." Wisdom responds, "I did my part." That distinction restores balance. As we release the need for validation, our actions become cleaner. We speak without posturing. We work without resentment. We set boundaries without needing applause. This quiet independence unnerves those who rely on emotional reactions to assert influence. Our calm signals that our center is no longer negotiable. Over time, we discover a deeper confidence, one that does not swell with praise or collapse under criticism. Anger fades because there is less at stake. When the ego stops demanding constant reassurance, the nervous system relaxes. What once felt personal now feels procedural. We respond, but we are no longer wounded. This discipline also sharpens perspective. We see how often anger was rooted not in injustice, but in pride, not in harm, but in disappointment that the world did not revolve around our effort. Seeing this clearly is humbling, but humility is stabilizing. It grounds us in reality rather than illusion. Thus, the eighth step toward mastering anger is detachment from validation and outcomes. We act with care, then let go. We measure ourselves by integrity, not reaction. When praise comes, we accept it lightly. When it does not, we continue undisturbed. And in this freedom from expectation, anger finds little reason to rise. Principle number 9. Remember impermanence and the shortness of life. Anger shrinks the world until only the offense remains. It traps us in the immediacy of irritation, convincing us that this moment is everything. The 9th discipline restores proportion by reminding us of impermanence. Nothing we are angry about will last. Not the insult, not the frustration, not even the people involved. When we remember how brief and fragile life is, anger struggles to justify its intensity. We ask ourselves a disarming question: will this matter tomorrow, in a year, at the end of my life? Most anger cannot survive that inquiry. It feeds on the illusion of permanence, as though a single moment defines the whole. Perspective punctures that illusion. What once felt urgent begins to feel small, manageable, even trivial. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself how quickly all things pass: fame, conflict, praise, blame. By placing every irritation against the vastness of time, he loosened its grip. We do the same. We zoom out. We remember that history will not pause to record our momentary outrage. Each morning we quietly acknowledge that today is not guaranteed. This is not morbid, it is clarifying. Knowing that our time is limited makes anger feel like an expensive indulgence. How much of a finite life are we willing to spend in bitterness? How many hours are we prepared to trade for the fleeting satisfaction of being upset? Impermanence also reframes other people. Those who provoke us are temporary presences in our story. Some will pass out of our lives entirely. Others will change. We ourselves will change. To anchor our peace to momentary behavior is to build on sand. When we remember this, we loosen our grip, and anger loosens with it. Seneca warned that life is long enough only if we do not waste it. Anger is among the greatest wastes. It consumes attention without producing value. It steals energy from work, from learning, from presence. By remembering mortality, we become more selective about where we spend our emotional currency. This discipline does not make us indifferent to injustice or harm. It makes us efficient. We address what must be addressed, then move on. We refuse to replay grievances that add nothing but heat. When action is required, we take it. When it is not, we release the matter. Time is too scarce for endless rumination. Over time, this awareness brings a quiet urgency to live well. We choose patience over pride, clarity over conflict. Anger begins to feel like a distraction from what actually matters. Acting with integrity, strengthening the mind, and leaving each day without inner disorder. We also become gentler with ourselves and others. Everyone we meet is navigating a brief, imperfect existence. Remembering this softens our judgments. It reduces the need to win every exchange or correct every slight. We preserve our energy for what endures: character. Thus, the 9th step toward mastering anger is remembrance of impermanence. We place each irritation against the horizon of time and mortality. Most cannot bear the comparison. What remains worthy of action receives it calmly. What does not, we let pass. And in doing so, we reclaim our life from needless turmoil, moment by moment, day by day. Principle number 10. Choose character over momentary satisfaction. Anger always offers a bargain. Release now, regret later. It promises relief in exchange for integrity, momentary satisfaction in exchange for long-term strength. The 10th discipline is the final refusal of that bargain. We decide, consciously, repeatedly, that who we are becoming matters more than how good it feels to react. Mastery of anger is ultimately mastery of identity. Every provocation places a quiet question before us. What kind of person will I be in this moment? Anger urges speed. Character urges alignment. The difference between the two is the difference between impulse and principle. When we choose character, we accept short-term discomfort to preserve long-term coherence. We remain whole. Marcus Aurelius measured life not by external victories, but by fidelity to reason and virtue. He reminded himself that no external event could force him to act against his own standards. This reminder is our anchor. We are not compelled to respond poorly. We are invited to respond well. Each morning we set our intention before the world tests it. We decide in advance that anger will not dictate our conduct. When the moment arrives, the decision has already been made. This pre-commitment removes negotiation. There is no inner debate, no weighing of indulgence against restraint. The path is clear because it was chosen in calm. Choosing character also means accepting that restraint may go unnoticed. No applause follows composure. No praise accompanies silence. Yet this is precisely where strength is forged. We do not act well to be seen acting well. We act well because it preserves the inner order we refuse to compromise. Epictetus taught that freedom is obedience to reason. When anger tempts us, reason asks a single question: will this action make me better or merely louder? The answer is usually clear, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. Over time, this discipline reshapes our reputation, both outward and inward. Others come to expect steadiness from us. More importantly, we come to trust ourselves. Self-trust is built not on success, but on consistency. Each time we choose character over impulse, that trust deepens. Anger loses its allure when we recognize how small its rewards are. The sharp word lands, the argument is won, the tension releases, and then emptiness follows. Character, by contrast, compounds. It strengthens judgment, stabilizes emotion, and leaves us intact. One path consumes us, the other builds us. This final discipline unifies all the others. Control over judgment, patience in response, compassion, perspective, purpose. Each exists to protect the same thing: the person we are shaping through repeated choices. Anger is not merely an emotion to manage. It is a test of authorship over our own life. Thus, the 10th step toward mastering anger is a declaration. We choose who we are over how we feel. We choose coherence over catharsis, dignity over discharge. In doing so, we claim the highest form of power, not dominance over others, but command over ourselves. And once that command is established, anger no longer rules. It answers. Dear Stoic friends, controlling your anger is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. True strength is not in the heat of your reaction, but in the discipline of your restraint. When anger rises, remember, you don't have to obey it. Pause. Choose reason. Protect your character. Now reflect. Which of the 10 Stoic principles stood out to you most? And how will you apply it the next time you're provoked? Share it in the comments. I genuinely read your insights, and I value them. In a few days, I'll release another focused, practical Stoic lesson. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next teaching. If this helped you, support the channel by liking the video and sharing it with someone working on self-mastery. Thank you sincerely for your time, your attention, and your commitment to becoming stronger, calmer, and more disciplined.